Boop 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 boop. Ba-doop boop boop ba-doop bam ba-doop bam bam ba-doop bam bam ba-doop bam bam ba-dow. Bow ba-doop beep beep dow. Ba 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 dee beep boo. Dee 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 doo doo. Hey hey hey. Another one bites the dust. Yeah, boom, boom, boom. Another pug bites the dust. Hey, and another pug bug. How you guys doing? It's hot. It's hot. That's all. Like, it's hot. I've been hot. I've been hot. How you been? I've been hot. It's been hot. It's getting hot in here. I'll keep my clothes on because I don't want my channel to get banned. I am getting so hot. It is very hot now. If you're hearing a hissing in the background, I do apologize about the hissing in the background. It is a fan, because it is so hot that if I don't have the fan running, I will die. Very simple, very easy to understand. If I do not keep this fan on, I will likely die. Probably going to pause. No, I forgot to go get a cup of water. I don't have a cup of water, and you should be drinking water. Here is my recommendation for each and every one of you at this moment in your lives. Have a glass of water. Drink some water. Because if you don't drink water, you die. Very simple. Ligon to Z, good to see you, bud. Good to see you, my man. Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure. Today, a vodka seltzer. Good idea, CR Strifey. Chug that vodka seltzer. That's the same. That's the same as drinking a cool glass of clear water with ice. Yeah, that's the same. I mean, you're right. It does have water. Big water won't get me to drink their tainted liquid. I'll collect rainwater, thank you very much. That's how I go. So we have like a hodgepodge of articles today. I mean, where do I want to start? You know how I've been saying it over and over again. It feels like they're just sort of churning out the same article over and over again. Like, I think that there is like a hope at this stage in the game that the media class, I think, is getting to this point now where they're starting to think like, maybe if we just release the same article over and over again, something will actually happen about it. Maybe if we actually point out that minimum wages far short of income needed to afford rent, maybe if we just keep saying this, it'll eventually sink in and there'll be a general understanding amongst the society that, like, wait a minute, if people can't pay their rent, then they can't live in the area to do the job. Huh. Midnight Rose, any thoughts about the U.S. soldier that defected to North Korea? Not the first guy, but I wonder what the reasons are. Been a while since this happened. I only kind of heard about that in passing, so I'm not, like, an expert on it, but, like, I assume that it's for all the reasons that it's usually for. That the propaganda of the Western system is shitty, and a guy probably spent a bit of time in North Korea and was like, this place is actually okay. And probably fell in love with a North Korean lass. I bet you anything. That it's probably a romance. Hold on, guys. I'm so sorry. My dog, he's reverse sneezing. Milo. 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 I know, my man. It's so dumb when this happens to you. Isn't that dumb? Here, bud. Want some treats? Want some treats, my man? Oh, want some treats, man. That'll help you. Maybe swallow it, okay? Have some swallows. Have some swallows. Oh, my man. There's your capitalist innovation right there. Now we took a look at a perfectly good breed, took a look at a perfectly good pug, and thought, you know what we could do? We should mass produce the pug and send it into the world. There'll be absolutely no negative consequences for that. There'll be absolutely no negative consequences. Meanwhile, my poor little pug almost every day, it's just like poor little guy. Poor little guy. I was seeing some talk about how even though it's illegal in DPRK law, if he isn't seen to be an agent or a provocateur, he might be allowed to stay as an English teacher or actor even. Assuming they don't just send him back. I mean, that is sort of the concern from the position of the North Koreans, right? Like, how do they know he's genuine, right? How do they know this isn't just like a CIA psyop? That he's just like, yeah, I'm defecting to North Korea. Completely trust me and allow me into your society as a white Westerner who is a part of the United States military. Absolutely. Yeah, I've worked for the military for 15 years and have extensive CIA training, and I'm completely interested in joining your society here in North Korea. Please, can you tell me where the nuclear codes might be found? You know, like, I understand why they might be skeptical of him. Keep him at a bit of arm's length. Like, it always happens. It goes always, honestly. Like, and there's a long history of people defecting. Like, during the colonial period, right, you had plenty of people who would, quote-unquote, go native, right? Like, that's a fairly common occurrence, where people would just have come over from the old world, living in the new world, and they would be interacting with these First Nations people, and they would be thinking to themselves, this is okay. Let's just do this. Let's just go live with these people. What they're doing seems fine. And they would do that. And it wasn't uncommon. And so defections and things like this, I will say that I expect that either the story will be completely swept away and no one will ever remember it, or the right will somehow grab onto it and be like, this is wokeism. And it'll become like a way bigger story. Because at the end of the day, the story is just like, one guy thinks North Korea's okay. Some experts were also saying it's very expensive for the DPRK. Personal driver, surveillance, protection, all of that. Also, he was a young black man, a private second class, I think. When he defected, they said he was in trouble with his superiors. I don't know the real story. Oh yeah, of course. We'll never know the real story, right? Like, we'll never know the real story. So it's, to me, it's just another defection. Like, and it happens all sides all the way, right? Like, there's people who defect from North Korea to South Korea, people who defect from South Korea to North Korea, people defect North Korea to the West, West to North Korea. It goes all ways. And everybody's story is, like, unique to that individual, and everybody has their own reasons. So I've never looked at defections as like a proof, like somebody standing there being like, an American defecting to North Korea, that's the proof of the superiority of Jewish, right? I'm like, probably not. Probably not. There were tons of defectors during the Korean War. I think an entire American platoon had defected or something like that. Yeah. I mean, there were defectors in the Vietnam War. There were people who just, like, joined the Vietnamese. Like, it happens. And everybody's got their own reasons, and everybody's got their own story, and everybody has their own idea, right, about why they're doing what they're doing. Because war is ridiculous. The whole thing is ridiculous. Like, the entire thing is just a cavalcade of utter nonsense. Like, can you imagine going to another country where you don't speak the language and, like, walking around with a gun with the intention of just shooting people? It's crazy. It's crazy what we're doing. Like, it's insane. And so I really perceive, like, I can see a guy who's just been put in this situation, kind of walking around, and then suddenly having a little moment of like, wait, what the hell am I doing here? What the hell am I doing here? I'm walking around following orders from this like government that like, and you just imagine like these guys having a mushroom trip or something over there, right? Doing some psychedelics or a DMT trip and just being like, what the fuck is this? Why is this? Right? And just like trying to get away from it, right? I mean, for fuck's sakes, that's what I'd be trying to do. I don't want to be part of the American military. I wouldn't want to be part of the American military industrial complex. It's ridiculous. The whole thing is ridiculous. And yet we all kind of go along with it. We're all still paying our taxes, like just going to work. And you're like, yeah, this is a normal thing for societies to do, you know. This is the natural hierarchy, you see, and you can't get away from the natural hierarchy when you create hierarchies. And when hierarchies are created in society, if you try to fight against them, then it leads to disaster. I read a fictional book about it, and that's the basis of what I think about these things. Is this fictional work? The gulags were terrible because I read the Gulag Archipelago, which is a book of historical fiction, and that's just as good as doing real academic work. I hope you guys are all doing really well out there. I gotta tell you, man, the heat has like absolutely hit me. Like, I'm absolutely like blah because of this heat right now. I did have the absolute pleasure today of writing about China. So I've been enjoying doing that. It's very pleasurable, writing about a place that's actually building a proper society. Like, meanwhile, we're getting headlines here. This woman makes $67,000 a year, right? She's couch surfing until she can find affordable housing. Teresa Sheena helps vulnerable people find affordable housing. Now, she's struggling to find something for herself. Sheena, 53, has been without a home since March this year, when her new Westminster, BC apartment burned down. Since then, she says she's struggled to find a new apartment for herself, her 21-year-old daughter, and their 13-year-old cat. The three now live apart with their daughter, looking for her own place, the cat staying with Sheena's son, and Sheena responding to sleeping in her car or relying on the kindness of friends to lend their couch. I make just under $70,000 a year, and I haven't been able to find a place. I work full-time, and we are essentially homeless, says Sheena, who's looking for housing across Metro Vancouver, from Vancouver itself to North Vancouver and New Westminster further east. I'm looking at everything available. Studios, one-bedroom, even two-bedroom apartments that I'm never going to be able to afford, says Sheena. While her previous apartment cost $1,400 a month, Sheena says she's struggling to find a new place even with a larger budget of $1,700 to $2,200. Sheena says her monthly income comes to $5,644.07, but after taxes, car payments, debt consolidation fees, tax penalties, and credit card bills, she has about $2,722 a month for rent and personal expenses. According to the latest numbers from rental.ca, the average rent for a one-bedroom apartment in BC is over $2,200 and over $2,900 in Vancouver. Other renters have also spoken out about feeling squeezed out of Vancouver and surrounding Metro Vancouver region due to high rental costs. Carl Eaton, 55, earns about $75,000 a year, but is on a desperate hunt for an affordable two-bedroom apartment for himself and his 18-year-old son by July 31st. Eaton and his son have lived in basement suites for the past 2 years, but kept having to move when owners sold the property or moved their relatives into the suite. Nobody can afford rent. As a community integration specialist with the province, Sheena helps people find affordable housing, something she considers ironic considering her current situation. My job is outreach with the most vulnerable people in the province, but I myself am homeless, she said, noting she's not eligible for financial or housing support, as she's considered middle class with her income level. When I apply for places that I thought I could afford to pay, I've often received emails that it's already taken or no longer available. With her $67,000 annual salary, Sheena says she's ineligible for BC's housing one-bedroom subsidized housing due to housing income limit, which is $58,000 in Vancouver. The limit is based on figures from the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation and represents the gross household income for eligibility in affordable housing programs in different parts of BC. But she says BC Housing moved her up on the wait list when she applied with her daughter, who's a student at UBC. We should do away with the housing income limit because at this day and age, nobody can afford rent. Waiting 5 to 10 years on the wait list doesn't help either. I don't know what to do. I've exhausted all my options by reaching out to cooperative housing, to friends and co-workers, looking for a roommate, and even reached out to MLAs. My only real option is to leave the province, said Sheena, adding she's committed to her job and clients, with no plan to leave BC anytime soon. Municipalities need to unite, says advocate. Margareta Dovgal, a member of the City of Vancouver's Renter Advisory Committee, says Sheena isn't alone in struggling with the current rental market. As a lifelong renter, Dovgal said her family moved around the Lower Mainland to find affordable housing. My family was progressively pushed further and further to the suburbs. It's not exactly a new situation. A lot of people have been feeling that for quite some time, she said on CBC's The Early Edition, noting some major concerns include lack of housing supply and municipal coordination across the Lower Mainland. Dovgal says municipalities need to work together to address housing affordability and availability as people getting priced out of Vancouver are starting to look out into surrounding areas. Anyone who lives in Vancouver might be looking for places next door in Burnaby, so all Lower Mainland municipalities need to be coordinating on this a lot more effectively, says Dovgal. She adds there have been some positive changes in recent years, with municipalities being more open to changing zoning rules and densifying. I think the political landscape has recognized this, but there's still so much more needed to get that issue over the line and make sure everyone has safe, secure housing. Literally no mention of the corporate hoarding, right? That corporations can come in and just buy up properties, right? The Airbnb disasters, all of this kind of stuff. It's nice to hear these stories because it makes you feel less alone. Mr. Moon, good to see you, bud. Larry, Conton, John, absolute pleasure. Grinning, good to see you guys. Good to see you. Thanks, guys, for all being here today. It's nice that we're all going through this. Mr. Moon says, I'm worried. I'm planning on moving to a new city. Will I find somewhere to live? Yep. That's the big looming question mark these days. Like, I know for myself, like, I live in an apartment that is, I feel, actually too big for me. That I actually think I could get a roommate into this space. And it's something that I'm open to, and that I'm if a friend of mine were to recommend somebody, or if something was to come up, I think I would try to make that happen. It would certainly be a financial boon to me personally. But I've looked around for a smaller place, and because of the ridiculousness of the rental market, if I were to move into a smaller place in a worse location, I would end up spending more. Like, it's ridiculous what's happening in this market. It's ridiculous what's going on, and of course the blame is all getting on the shoulders of immigrants. It's all coming down to just, there's too many immigrants and we got to get something done about these immigrants, and that's where the conversation is settling, and that's what the conversation is going to be about moving forward. Like, when the Conservatives take power, they're going to be talking about immigration. That's what they're going to be talking about, because it's an easy scapegoat. And it means that you don't need to actually have a serious conversation about the nature of the capitalist system, the nature of the hoarding that's going on in this country. Yeah, literally with one generation, the housing market got destroyed. Absolutely. Good to see you, Baked Potato. Good to see you, Eric. Yeah, President Xi, please liberate us, the wealthiest nation in human history, by bringing poverty alleviation and affordable housing. My people yearn for freedom. Well, and this issue is solvable. Like, it's solvable. We're just not doing it. And that the capitalist class is more than willing to admit their complete incompetence and failure when it comes to actually building housing, right? Like they're basically just admitting to us that capitalism is not capable of predictable of planning. It's not capable of looking at the market and being like, immigration like this, housing should be like this, we should build housing. It's not capable of it. It's constantly plunging us into a series of crises because of all of this idea that the free market will decide. Well, where's that free market deciding? It's nowhere, right? It's nowhere. Because at the end of the day, people who have hundreds of billions of dollars are not actually that incentivized by profit anymore, right? That they don't need to do anything. They don't need to invest. They don't need to build anything. They don't need to create anything. They don't need to do anything. Why? Because they're fine. They've got the money, right? They're not interested in actually building a society or creating a society, right? It's the great failing of trickle-down economics as a theory, is that if the idea of of investing money is to make more money, well, then what happens when somebody already has all of the money, right? And the answer just being like, well, they want more money. Well, okay, how's this going for us? How's this happening for us? That the truth is that they're just going to sit on their big piles of gold like dragons and just do whatever they want with it. Isaac writes, minimum wage in 1980 in the U.S. was $3.10. Now it's $7.25, but the cost of living has gone up. There has been a cumulative price increase of 270.28% since then. Yeah, like it's absolutely ridiculous. Yeah, they'd rather push culture war shit, keep all talk within the incestual, corporo-politico fuckfest than for a second questioning our economics. Always another scapegoat, you bet. Capitalism is totally insane and unnecessary. Listen to a good lecture by Jason Hickel on degrowth, which really makes that clear. Well, a big thing about like how we perceive our economies and how we perceive the society that we live in, everything is based on financialization, right? That's how we think about our economy and our economics. The invisible line goes up, right? Therefore good. Forget about the fact that invisible line goes up because of just meaningless bullshit. That if rich people trade art with one another, then that's considered line go up and good, right? That if rich people just exchange houses with one another, line go up, economic growth. The economy's never been stronger. Command Genius, I found a right-winger that could talk to you. They're kind of crazy, to be honest. Yeah, I mean, they're a right-winger. They're a libertarian minarchist. Already, man, like, libertarian means whatever the person who is a libertarian wants it to mean. That's something I've come to understand about the word libertarian, is that it doesn't seem to mean anything, right? That libertarian is just kind of what people want it to mean for that individual. And so every single time I end up talking to a libertarian, I got to be like, okay, what do you mean by libertarian? Like, what is a libertarian? Like, what is that? Because it seems to just be a word that is... It just seems to have so many different meanings that it's lost its meaning completely, right? That, like, when someone says they're a communist, right? Well, that the workers own the means of production, right? Stateless, classless society, right? That's the core of it, right? But libertarian seems to be like there are left-wing libertarians and there are right-wing libertarians, and it just seems to mean it just seems to mean anything at this point. So it's annoying. Talking about China, John, did you see the link about the Xi Jinping book that I posted in the Discord, which is about his different speeches about how Chinese communism functions and how it developed? Yeah, it's The Governance of China, right, by Xi Jinping. It's a collection of his speeches that he's been given, what's being called Xi Jinping thought, right? Which is like Dengist thought or Maoist thought. And it's a pretty standard fare, honestly, but good reading. I've read not all of it, but I've read some of it, and it's my takeaway from most of those speeches is really just like my takeaway from most of those speeches is that Xi Jinping is staying the course, right? That a course was set by the Dengists, right? And that Xi Jinping is staying the course. Hold on. Milo, I took you down, dude. You're fine, buddy. You're fine. Come lie down, okay, bud? You're fine. Yeah, it's funny how they mock China for building all those ghost cities and infrastructure back in the early 2010s. Yeah, I mean, because China had a lot of reasons for building those ghost cities. One of them was that I think that they were very concerned about population growth, hence the one-child policy. So they were just like, we need this infrastructure. Like, yeah, but so like, can you imagine if we had done such a thing, right? Can you imagine we were to do it? They're economically left-wing, culturally right-wing. So they think the workers should own the means of production, but it's not okay to be gay? Is that more or less what I'm getting from that? John, do you have any thoughts on the new libertarian rallying cry, decentralized finance? Oh yeah, this whole crypto bro stuff, right, and all this kind of stuff. Like, these guys view the idea of decentralized finance as a blow against the banking sector, failing to recognize entirely that the people who own the majority of the currency and the majority of the financial system in a decentralized system will be the owners of that system, right? Like, just because it's done on a blockchain and just because everybody can see the transactions as it's happening. Well, you can see it, right? That way you can keep track of it. Well, so what? Like, that's more or less my opinion. So what? So they'll just steal from you openly. So they'll just pick your pocket openly. You'll be able to look at the ledger and be like, hey, you stole that money from me. And they'll go, yeah, we certainly did. And that'll be the end of that conversation. Like, anybody who thinks that a decentralized finance system or a digitized finance system is going to somehow operate for the benefit of workers, that somehow it's going to operate for the benefit of people, is fooling themselves. Right? That the reason why these institutions are pushing for quote-unquote decentralized finance, right, is because it's going to benefit capital. It's going to give capital more control. It's going to allow capitalists to have more direct control over the economy, have more direct control over the means of production, and have more direct control over you. And if you look at the ledger and find out that, oh, wow, you've been picking our pockets, well, so fucking what? Like, so what? Who are you going to talk to? Who are you going to turn to? Who are you going to complain to? They own those people. You're gonna call police? They own the police. You're gonna call the military? They own the military. You're gonna call your MLA? You're gonna call your MP? You're gonna call your congressman? They own those people. Right? It'll all just be out in the open. You'll just be able to see it openly. Like, what have I been saying this entire time? For years now I've been saying this. That there's going to be a moment where the mask will come off and they will simply rule this place openly. Well, here it is. And they're going to usher it in themselves. They'll be like, hey, look, check it out. We've got this great ledger that you can take a look at. Yeah, check it. The Bank of America, right, stole $1 billion from you guys. Isn't that great? Well, back to work. Like, that's what's happening. That's what it's going to look like, and that's what it's going to be. And any of these, like, right-wing crypto bros that are sitting around being like, this is going to usher in an age of freedom, and we're all going to be able to, are fooling themselves. They misunderstand the nature of capitalism. They misunderstand the nature of their own system. And it's proving once again one of my main core theses, which is that capitalists don't actually understand the system that they live in. That the capitalists themselves don't actually understand capitalism. And the big reason why they don't understand capitalism is because they refuse to read Marx. They refuse to actually read the critics of capitalism. They refuse to actually know something about capitalism seriously. And so it's it's a fool's errand. Right? The rich and the powerful are not going to do something for the benefit of the people. It's just not gonna be the case. Countries having spare cities. Oh no, the horror. MK Sublime. Love the name, bud. The guy Command Genius was talking about. Very good. Welcome aboard. Glad to have you. Feel free to join the chat. Ask some questions. Do some stuff. We are an open group here. Like, I understand the appeal of it, right? Like, I follow people who are very much like, this will get the banks, haha, right? But it won't, right? The banks will use this system, right? Like, it's not going to make the Bank of America collapse or anything. It might alter the configuration by which, like, someone like Jamie Dimon interacts with the market. Right? That instead of it being Jamie Dimon, CEO of the Bank of America, it'll be Jamie Dimon, individual interacting with the market. Right? Instead of Bill Gates using Chase Manhattan as a middleman, it'll just be Bill Gates and hiring some accountant, and that accountant will be the person who does the direct connection to the market. Right? And it'll all be open on the ledger, and we'll all be able to see all of the transactions and everything. So we'll be able to see what they do openly, and they'll be like, yeah, like it's not going to change anything. It's just going to make it easier for them at the end of the day. We wouldn't have the protections for people that we do when it comes to banking if it wasn't for the federal government. Glass-Steagall, FDIC, yeah, all of that kind of stuff. Like, banks need to be regulated. Like, these places need to be regulated. John, which group do you think are worse, the libertarians or anarchists? I generally think that anarchists are more or less a positive force. And anytime I've ended up talking to anarchists, I find myself bobbing along and being like, yep, absolutely, absolutely. If it wasn't for the one key disagreement that I have between anarchists, which I'm very open about what that disagreement is, which is that I don't think anarchists take the threat of state violence very seriously. I don't think they actually respect what the government would be willing to do. That if you were to actually begin achieving your anarchist idea of what a society should actually look like, the United States will just roll their tanks through, right? They'll just come in with their military and blow it all apart. And that if you don't actually have a strong, centralized, powerful, central state of some kind that's actually capable of defending against it, you're going to get overrun. And that's the key difference, as far as I can tell. Because usually when anarchists are talking to me, I'm just like, yeah, absolutely, yep, completely. I don't really go for libertarians, right-wing libertarians specifically, because I don't really buy into an ideology that can be disproven with a single game of Monopoly. That's more or less my position on right-wing libertarianism. It's just like, sit down, play one game of Monopoly. There's your whole idea. Right? There's your whole thesis, your whole concept. Right? Everybody starts with equal amount of money, which they wouldn't if libertarian ideas were to be enacted in today's society. That wouldn't be the case. But let's say that everybody does start with equal amount of money. Okay, well, what happens? Well, markets eventually devolve into monopoly, right? And if you don't actually do something about that, that's the inevitable result. And everybody's known this for thousands of years. Everybody's known this for thousands of years. This isn't new information. And libertarianism is an ideology that seems to just not accept it. That just seems to just say, like, yeah, we can do this and it won't result in monopoly because I'll be able to go do business with somebody else. It's like you just don't understand the nature of what a monopoly is. Like, you don't understand what the nature of what a monopoly actually is. Like, it's wild. I think market socialism is the most realistic socialist system that could be implemented in the West. I mean, the issue with markets is exactly what I'm talking about, is that markets eventually fall into monopoly, right? And that you can see that there are certain things that should not be part of a market. They just shouldn't be part of a market system. Like housing is a good one. Like housing should not be a commodity that can be traded on an open market. And more we're starting to see why that's the case. Because what happens is multi-billion-dollar corporations hoard huge sections of the housing market because they're treating it as an investment and a commodity, not as something that the populace actually needs, right? That like if you actually think about what is happening in the society as a video game, like if you were playing a video game right now and you had like people homeless in the streets, then you also had empty houses everywhere, right? It'd be like a 1-to-1. You'd be like, this is the easiest solution ever. Put people in houses, right? But that we've created a social system that says, no, we don't put people in houses, right? Because I own that house and I don't want those people in those houses because I own it, right? I have a little piece of paper that I bought with little pieces of paper that says that I own that place. And so we get to keep people homeless in this society. Like, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous what we're doing. And we could resolve it. It would take a week to resolve, but we choose not to, right? We just choose not to. And I tend to think that when people start talking about systems that are realistic, it's more or less just like a concession. Like, we do have to concede that like fascism and far right ideas are very popular here in the West. That there is this kind of concession, but I don't know why that means we need to demand less, right? Yeah, rather than worship markets, we could always, solve problems. Well, because fundamentally what you're saying when you say let the market decide is you're saying ask rich people permission. That's really the case. That's really the case. Command Genius, let MK Sublime talk for himself, okay? Like we don't need to if you're so sure he's going to hang himself, let him hang himself. I'm glad that we have a new fella in the chat. That's as simple as that. And so far so polite. So nothing wrong there. Central state power, is that how the Taliban beat the US in Afghanistan? That is a fair point, Grinning. Like, no, I know that you are an anarchist, Grinning, and so I know that you're going to push back on my position, and I'm happy about that. And that's another one of the reasons. Like, I think that the relationship between, like, I don't define the relationship between anarchists and communists as the relationship between the Soviets and like the French anarchists. Like, I just don't look at it that way. That I think that anarchists and communists are natural allies, and that the disagreements that exist between the anarchists and the communists are righteous in their very nature. That anarchists are skeptical of centralized state power, and are right to be skeptical of centralized state power, and communists view centralized state power as a necessary evil. As a force that needs to be part of the equation. And I think that's the key difference. And I think that is a conversation that needs to continue always unfolding, always happening. That because it's completely possible for a centralized state to overwhelm the demands of the populace, just as I think it's possible for a decentralized state to be overwhelmed by a central power structure. So this is such an interesting point, though. Is that how the Taliban beat the U.S. in Afghanistan? I mean, I make the argument that the U.S. kind of beat themselves, right? It's not like the Taliban didn't throw the United States out. But the Taliban was just sort of there, waiting for the United States to finally withdraw. And when the United States finally withdrew, they were the ones that had been going around making the agreements with everybody, right? And when the United States left, the Taliban, everybody just kind of pointed at the Taliban and said, okay, you're in charge now, right? Which is wild to me, man. Like, the fact that it's the Taliban, like, This is what I've been saying about like Middle East and Iran specifically. I've been saying this about, but it makes sense for Afghanistan too. Is that if you're in a period of war, the people you want in charge are the people who are willing to shoot guns and maintain your cultural sovereignty. Well, that's your religious theocrats. That's your theocrats and your your conservatives mainly, right? Those are the people who are going to do that. And that's essentially what's going down in Iran and Afghanistan. The market part of market socialism is what caused a good portion of Yugoslavia's economic problems. There's more nuance, yeah. I would argue that Yugoslavia's problems were caused by NATO bombs. I think the NATO bombs were probably the worst part. I actually think a lot of libertarians acknowledge the connection between the state and the market, and that goes into justification for the abolition of the state. Right, but this is kind of more or less what I'm talking about when I say that like the whole thesis falls apart. Right? If you abolish the state, i.e. if you abolish any corrective measure or any kind of system that attempts to create limits to the market, although, I mean, the existence of the market is predicated by the state in the first place, right? Like that's sort of, but if you were to manage this, if you were to actually extract the state and say that it's a pure, free, open market, well, the result is a game of Monopoly. Play one game of Monopoly, what happens? Right? What happens in a game of Monopoly? Unrestricted capital. Well, one person just owns the market. One person ends up owning the board, right? That's the whole point. That's why I don't think libertarianism is a very serious ideology, because I don't think they've actually thought it through very much. And that the more I investigate this, the more I talk to people, it's like, I hate to say it, it is something of a fantasy, right? Like, the entire thing collapses into a monopoly where one person owns the board. And the idea that, well, I'll just go deal with someone else is like a complete misunderstanding of the nature of monopoly and monopoly power. Food prices are over 9% in June and gone up 20% in the previous 2 years. Yeah. Abolish the state. What about democracy? Democracy is kind of cringe. I mean, if you consider what is happening in America to be democracy, I can see why you could justify that statement. But for those of us who actually understand what democracy is and see democracy working in other nations and have been working in other nations, like, I would prefer to live in a democratic structure than like an autocracy of some kind. The anarchist idea, as far as I understand it, comes down to relying on people participating in an anarchist society to support it enough to fight and die for it, which opens another whole can of worms. Yeah, for sure. The Taliban are regimented, disciplined, keep their ranks focused on the mission. Just because they worked in cell formations doesn't mean they're evidence of anarchy working. Tyranny of majority. Like, as opposed to what? A tyranny of minority? So, how should rulers be chosen? How should rulers be chosen? How should we choose who? How do we agree upon what rules to be governed by? What are the rules by which we are governed by? How should we decide what is or is not acceptable in the society? So in that sense, I think decentralized resistance works insofar that people fighting the U.S. wanted nothing to do with the U.S. The people naturally wanted to preserve what they had, yeah. Tyranny of majority is something Hitler said in Mein Kampf, yeah, fair enough. The one difference between communists and anarchists is that anarchists have to be worried about state power in the hands of capitalists. The one difference between communists and anarchists is that anarchists have to be worried about state power in the hands of capitalists and the communists. I mean, it is concern for the abuse of state power, right? And it's absolutely, like, state power is absolutely abusable. No doubt. Like, no doubt. What are you saying, Eric? The CIA coup withering within Yugoslavia, they pitted different ethnic groups against each other. I just heard a huge thunderclap, guys, so if the power goes out, I apologize in advance. Abolish the CIA, I think we can agree on that. Thank you, MK Sublime. It's nice that we found something to agree on. The CIA is the largest terrorist organization that exists in the world. Here's just a great photo that I think just encapsulates the moment of the West. I know a libertarian personally, and he's one of the biggest dickheads I've ever met. Not to mention he's a drug dealer and loves guns. Well, I do think that there are like just libertarians who more or less have turned fuck you, let me do what I want into an ideology. You know? Like, I just want to do what I want. Nobody can tell me what I can or cannot do. Right? Like, and they've put an ideology to it, and they've created a philosophy of thought that basically just boils down to what I say is correct, you know, and nobody should be able to tell me what I can and cannot do, which is like the antithesis of like, you can't really build a society on those principles. Like, how do you actually negotiate? How do you actually create a consensus of any kind? Libertarians like to think the society can function without laws. Yeah, I mean, it does seem to be the case, right? It just seems to be this idea that we can, that somehow if we just like let everything happen and just do whatever we want, that if everybody just does what they want, that somehow that's going to result in a positive outcome. It's like, probably not, right? Like, probably not. Like, we're not bears, you know? Like we have guns and nukes and stuff. Like, we've got things. We've got the capacity to articulate abstract thoughts. This is sort of the oddest part about the libertarian ideology, in my view, is that we have been given, life has granted us one of the most powerful gifts that a species can have. That we have the ability to articulate abstract thoughts, to have those abstract thoughts be understood in the abstract space, to reform and change those things in the abstract, and then manifest those things from the abstract to the real. Like, this is a process called planning. And it looks to me that the ethos of the day and the ethos of libertarianism essentially says we shouldn't use it. That this enormous, powerful gift that reality has bestowed upon humanity should be put aside in favor of just do what you want. And it's just not something that I can take very seriously, honestly. Like, I understand why people want that. Like, I think everybody intrinsically does want to be able to do whatever they want to do and have nobody tell them they can't, right? I think we all intrinsically want that, right? But we also intrinsically understand that that's not real. Like, that's no way to go about living a life, and that's no way of going about existing and creating a society of any sort. Like, you need to negotiate. You need to set precedent. You need to create understandings with your community. You need to create systems. You need to create institutions, right? Like, you need to build things. if you want to have 1 billion people, right? And if you want those 1 billion people to actually have a decent existence, well, you need to build institutions. Tough shit, right? Tough shit. Like, if you're sitting there thinking to yourself, well, institutions can turn corrupt and all go, well, too bad. Like, you need a healthcare system. You need a fire department. Like, you need some kind of institution that's responsible for being like, hey, if a tsunami comes and knocks out the East Coast, maybe we should have some kind of system to respond to such a thing, right? Like, hey, oh, you want electricity? Oh, maybe we should actually have a system responsible for maintaining the power grid, and it shouldn't just be a bunch of fucking monkeys doing anything they want, right? Which is more or less the libertarian ethos. It doesn't work. It doesn't work, and it doesn't work for very clear reasons, which is, if your idea is to just everybody do what they want and that'll work out, you're essentially saying let chaos reign, Well, you're going to find out very quickly that if you get into a fist fight with reality over which force is the more chaotic, you're going to lose. Reality is way more chaotic than we are, right? And if your goal is to just ride the chaos, well, reality will ride that chaos with you, and it'll show you what chaos really looks like. But like, how do you pick your leadership then? Like, if it isn't even theoretically that a majority chooses the leadership, or that laws are written by the majority, right? If it's a minority, well then what is the process by which this minority is chosen, right? Oh yeah, I would argue that it's not democracy that has failed us, but capitalism, right? That the system of capital has infected our democracy, and that it's no longer, that our democratic system is not actually operating as a democracy any longer. That it's essentially an oligarchy, right? That there was this great Princeton study that was done that showed that the governmental system doesn't respond to people any longer. It just responds to capital. It responds to money, right? And so the issue is not the theory of democracy, right? I think that's misplaced. It's the intersection between capitalism and democracy that makes it so that democracy no longer functions, and that it is as simple as rich people buy politicians, right? It really is as simple as that. And and so if you're standing there saying I'm against democracy, I mean, and the example that you use is the United States government, my rebut to that is no, that's capitalism, baby. That's capitalism, baby. That we need to be rid of capitalism, not democracy. We need to ensure that there is no capital ownership, and we need to make sure that there are people who are not hoarding vast sums of wealth so that they can purchase politicians. We just need to make sure that that's not possible. John says, anarchy fails to explain how to abolish the hierarchy of babies and children needing adults to learn and survive in nature. Checkmate, anarchists. Gotcha. I don't know that that's a very fair thing to say, John, honestly, because I think anarchists and anarchism, they view what they are attempting to accomplish as erecting a social system, and that the and that social system does not supersede the natural systems that exist in the world, right? Like any system that comes in that sort of defies, and I think capitalism is guilty of this, any system that comes in and sort of defies the rules of nature, right? And there are rules of nature, right? Is a social system that usually has to die and usually kills itself. And I don't know that anarchism, big bada boom. We got big bada boom happen. It's going to rain like hell, guys. Oh, yeah, it's already starting. Oh, yeah, it's going to rain like crazy. So if power goes out, I apologize in advance. If you're going to act like a contrarian antisocial rather, the people's police should arrest you, and they should re-educate radicals. See, that's a very radical statement to say, isn't it? Isn't it, Cotton? But I mean, I see where you're coming from. If the police were responding to the people, which they don't, but if they did, right, I could see why you would say such a thing. Eric says, you were talking about the fall of Yugoslavia was caused by NATO bombing. I'm saying that the bombing was caused by the CIA dividing the country by creating ethnic tension. How about we agree that we're both right, Eric? How about that? Because you're right. Right? I like this result. Let's both be right. Let's both be right together, Eric. What do you think? Huh? Huh? We can hold each other's hands, stare lovingly into one another's eyes. Yeah, the CIA is a domestic terror organization with a monopoly on the legal use of torture, psychological or otherwise. I mean, one would think that nobody should be doing torture, right? Like, they probably shouldn't have a monopoly on torture. We shouldn't have a group that's doing torture, right? that torture is one of those acts that reveals that is evil by its very nature, right? Like, I remember when Sam Harris was justifying the use of torture under the Bush administration, right? That he didn't seem to understand that torture is an act that is evil by its very nature. There is no reason to torture anyone ever under any circumstances whatsoever. And even the fake manufactured bullshit ticking time bomb scenario that he created didn't exist and was false. So the only reason you're torturing someone is to make them suffer, right? It's just to inflict suffering, and it's normal for the person who's being tortured to assume that the torturer is evil and is wrong, regardless of their justification. So it's an act that justifies itself as evil, but just by the simple act of doing it, and the rationale behind it is not really relevant. Like, it's not like killing someone in self-defense, right? There's no self-defense torture. It doesn't exist that way. Yeah, and it's also international. You and I, Sublime, we agree on this. Like, the CIA is a dangerous organization that should be dismantled. But if you stand up and say that and start to attain any power, they'll shoot you. They'll shoot you. Check this. Speaking of CIA propaganda, right? Here's your CIA propaganda right here. Of course, a democratic workplace would be socialism. Yeah, that's right. How dare you, being reasonable? Don't you know, according to capitalism rules, we can't both be right? We have to fight to the death. Nah. Listening to people talk in depth about the MK Ultra project had me fucked up for a good month. Yeah, ain't no way we stop doing any of that. Yep. You guys wait, man. There's going to be another church commission, like, in our lifetimes. There's going to be, it's going to be like a group of, like, Majorie Tyler Greens is the thing. It's going to be, like, given what's going on in America, it's going to be a bunch of Karens. It's going to be like a bunch of Karens are going to go and become congresswomen. And it's going to be like Lauren Boebert and Majorie Tyler Greene and Matt Gaetz and all these people. And they're going to be like, I don't like what the CIA has been doing with our money. I think that we got to go in there and see what the CIA is all about and what it's up to, you know. Don't you know, I think that there's an institution here in America that they need to respond to our Congress. And if they're not going to do what the Congress says, then by golly and gee whiz, I just don't think they need to exist, don't you think? We should at least know what they're doing, don't you think? Right? It's going to be like that. It's going to be like that. This poster is from a Texas children's textbook. They teach this in schools in Texas. Huh? Who's the groomer? Right? Who's the groomer? Golly gee willikers. Yep. You know, I read about that MK Ultra, and I gotta tell you, it's a bad situation. If the CIA was doing that, then what are they up to right now? Gee. And like all of these Karens and these like Lauren Boeberts and Majorie Tyler Greens and all this, they're gonna find out some shit. They're gonna find out some shit. You can use the exact arguments against torture as you can against the death penalty. I don't know. I don't know. I don't think so, Larry. I don't know. I have opinions on the death penalty. Like, I'm fine with the Nazis being executed. Like, that's fine, right? Like, that's fine. That if the Hague wants to hang a bunch of Nazis, I'm gonna be like, great. You know, like, I understand where the skepticism comes in, like the state executing like innocent people. That's usually what it boils down to, right? Or political adversaries, right? There's also that aspect of it for sure. but also like Nazis. I'm like, yeah. Like when China executed the billionaires responsible for the financial collapse that they had. You know, I was like, I don't mind that so much. You know, like here in America, the 2008 financial collapse happens, and we bail them out, like give them a little peck on the cheek and say, "Don't do it again, sweetie." In China, the same thing happens, and they're like, "Oh, you guys are dead. Like we are definitely executing you." And I'm just like, yeah, that's a different response, and I've got to tell you, I don't know that I'm opposed to that. You know? Like, I understand why people are opposed to it, and moreover, I don't necessarily even believe that my position is completely correct, but, like, I don't know. It gives me that little schadenfreude, or whatever it's called. It gives me that little sense of just like, yes. Yes. The billionaire stumbled into his own grave. Perfect. Brilliant. It feels good from a storytelling aspect. Just I like that the story of what happened to those guys in China. Like, in America, it pisses me off so much. That these guys are like, I'm a billionaire, I'm a scummy billionaire, I destroyed everyone's life, and now I'm drinking tahinis after getting $1 billion bailout. Ha 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 ha. Fuck you. Like, go fuck yourself. I like that the narrative is, I'm a billionaire, I ruined a bunch of people's lives, and then I got hung. Better story. Better story. Conton says, I'm not going to lie, it would be interesting to see an internet-based smartphone liberal democracy where people vote with the tap of their thumb, yes or no, on any policy. That's something I actually said, like, way back when I was in university, and all my friends were just like, they all poo-pooed it. They were all just like, what a dumb idea. That's a silly, you're going to end up with all kinds of dumb stuff. And I'm like, what, dumber than this? Dumber than this? You think it's going to be dumber than this? I don't think it'll be dumber than this. Like, it'll be dumb. We're humans, after all. But it's not going to be like this. Like, this is dumb, what we're doing. The issue, of course, with that idea is that it sort of assumes that people will know what it is they're voting for. Right? It sort of demands an educated populace. And, you know, I just don't think most people in this society are here for that. I just think most people in the society are not that interested in being educated. Like, it's the whole justification and the whole reason for electing representatives is that it's like, look, we're busy people. We've got shit to do, right? Like, we've got stuff going on. Like, even if your life was just like work a very small amount but have kids, right? Like, you got shit to do, right? You can't be spending your whole life learning every single thing about every single issue, right? Make it this guy's job. This guy seems to know what's going on. That's fine. Send him to the thing. Right? I understand that. Makes sense. Right? But, like, I actually would love to live in a society where everybody was educated to the point where we could entrust the populace with these sorts of votes. I actually think that would be a great thing to build institutionally. I think it'd be really wonderful to just say, like, no, we are going to build an education system that is perpetually educating the populace in what these issues actually are based on Marxist principles. That people will understand what the nature of the society is and what they're voting on and what they're voting for, right? That will have entire systems that are responsive to the questions of the populace, right? I think that'd be great. But no such institution exists in North America right now. We kind of have the edifice of that, right? We have sort of a wisp of a promise of that. Like, you would think that would be the role of the university. You would think that would be the role of the media, right? You would think that would be the role of these things. But it all gets tainted and destroyed by what? Capitalism. Capitalism. Capitalism makes everything terrible. It ruins everything completely and totally. Like, one of the things that it's totally ruining right now is, I haven't talked about this, but I'm going to because I actually love it. They did Our Place again, right? Remember Our Place? Remember this? It's this crazy lunatic canvas where you only get to paint it one pixel at a time. Look at this crazy shit, what these guys are doing. I love it. I love it. I love it. So, of course, the first thing that happens, right? For those who don't know, Spez is the CEO of Reddit. This is the first thing that happened. You have all the flags show up, as they always do, right? And then you also have the Void. I love these guys. The Void's my favorite part every time. The Void's my favorite part. Just like straight up creating just an evil demon monster that comes in, just eradicates. No way Destiny is making it on this board, eh? That's hilarious. That's hilarious. Anyway, I'm just going to leave this up here because I actually think it's cool. On gerrymandering, no electoral college, just pure techno-popular votes. So we'd like vote for leaders, or we would vote for legislation the way that we vote for like American Idol. My teacher in school would always say democracy versus socialism, which even I found funny. Yeah. Like, come on. Because there's no such thing as a socialist system or a communist system that uses democracy. Right? That's not a thing that's real. When you said, who's the groomer, they replied with drag queens. Yeah, but like, what's the... there have been 0 cases of child molestations at drag shows, but millions of churches. Like, come on. It's embarrassing, right? Like, at this stage in the game, the response against the trans community has been so outsized. It's so aggressively, overwhelmingly... Like, it's an obsession at this point. Like, I just got to start saying to these, like, conservative types, like, yeah, trans people exist. Like, get over it, right? Like, I know that you guys are jerking off to porn with, like, chicks with dicks and all this. Like, I know that you're doing this Fuda stuff. Like, I know you're doing that, right? Like, stop obsessing about it. Like, stop. Like, trans people represent something like 0.6% of the population. Stop basing it. Like, stop voting people into power based on this issue. Like, stop applauding at fucking shows when people start talking about trans people. Like, it's so outsized. Like, it's so that the response to it is so aggressively huge to how important the issue actually is. Like, oh no, you guys, it turns out that reality is actually far more interesting and creative than you. Right? That your imagination of what's possible in the universe doesn't actually meet to the overwhelming power of the universe itself. Who knew? Right? That, like, there just comes a point where I feel like I'm just watching these conservatives sort of jerk off about it. Right? Because they just can't get over it. They just cannot, like, it's like their mind has been blown and they're just like, whoa. Meanwhile, the rest of us are like, yeah. Anyway, what do you guys want for lunch? Like, we people who actually interact with trans people, and I work with trans people, right? Like, I see trans people every single day of my life, right? The people who are interacting with these people, we're literally just like, there's a person. There you go. They would like to be called they, or he, or she, or however, and I do that. And it's no different. Like, this is where it gets really embarrassing for these conservatives. It's no different than a woman saying, my name is Mrs. Nelson, and then you saying, well, hi there, miss. And she goes, no, it's Mrs. And then you go, miss. And she would be right to be like, no, it's Mrs. Nelson. Right? Get it right, you dumb idiot. Get it right. Well, I want to call you miss, and I'm not gonna. Your pronouns are not part. Like, if you started talking like that in that conversation, you would be thought of as a complete and total dullard, like a total dim-witted loser. And that's exactly how the rest of us look at these conservatives. That we're just like, a trans person who you perceive as male would like to be called she. Just do it. Like, it's the easiest thing that a person can possibly do. And moreover, you do it for everybody else, right? That this is just bigotry. It is just bigotry at this point. And it's obvious, right? That if I suddenly started to say, I want everybody to call me Jonathan. Like, if I said, please, no, my name is Jonathan. And if you were like, hey, Johnny, I'd be like, no, sir. Jonathan, please. My name is Jonathan. I would like to be referred to as Jonathan. And if you started to be like, well, Johnny, I'd be like, fuck you, dude. Get out of here. You're a dim-witted loser. And I would expect that of literally anybody else. And literally any kind of thing. But the only time it becomes an issue, and the pronouns are so, and they go, oh my God, I can't possibly, is when it's a trans person. So you're bigots. And it's obvious. We can see it. It's very clear. We don't think you're clever. We don't think you're funny. We think you're stupid because you are stupid. Because to be a bigot, you have to be dumb. You have to be dumb. Like, by default. You are taking one of God's creatures and separating them from the whole based on a difference that you consider to be outrageous, even though the universe clearly doesn't. The universe is clearly like, yeah, here we go, I made it. Deal with it. And the perception for those of us who actually deal with trans people on a regular basis and who actually got our feet on reality, right? The perception of us against these people is that you're nuts. You're acting like fucking lunatics. Like, grow up. Like, actually become adults. Recognize that these people are people. You don't need to behave like a child. Have some goddamn dignity and self-respect, and just say she, or they, or he, or whatever, because it's easy, and it's just basic respect, and it's not a burden of any kind, of any sort, and to try to convince anybody that it is makes you look fucking dumb. Super, super, super fucking dumb. Yep, Kevin. Some textbooks in the South still say that slaves were happy to be slaves. Sorry about that bit of a tirade. It's just I'm so over this issue, man. Like, I'm so like I say several times, I know people in my life who are trans, and the idea that there are people walking around acting like these fucking like dumbasses, just like, get over it. Like, fucking grow up. Midnight Rose says, John, did you see the new Florida Board of Education standards requires instructions for middle school students to include how slaves develop skills in which some incidents could be applied? Yeah, for their personal benefit. Slavery was good for the slaves, actually. Yuckles. It was totally fine that we went into their huts and kidnapped them and took them to another continent, stripped them of their identity, because they learned how to weld. Right? Totally fine that we chopped off their hands and pulled out their teeth and whipped them and changed their names, removed their culture completely, put them in a land that they were completely unfamiliar with, because boy, did they ever learn how to pick cotton. Like, not going to complain about horrible people meeting their maker, but the whole system needs to tighten up. Yeah, 4% of people on death row in the U.S. are innocent. I mean, we're dealing with the United States, right? Like, the United States is completely profit driven. Like, the innocence of the victims of the prison industrial complex is not part of the equation. There's nobody in the prison industrial complex that cares about the innocence of these people. Like, that's not really the point. The point is, how do we make as much money as possible? Like, just because you're innocent doesn't mean anything. So we can execute people, but not torture them under any circumstance. Correct. Like, there is no good reason to torture a person. Right? Even if they've done a crime. Right? There are good reasons to incarcerate a person. Right? Like, if a guy murders his brother in public and everybody saw it and we have photo evidence, that person should at least be incarcerated, right? And if that guy is like, yeah, if you let me out, I'm gonna murder again, and I'm gonna just start shooting people randomly. Like, I guess the question I have for people who are against the death penalty is there a line? Like, is there any circumstance or any situation that you can imagine? Like, should Adolf Hitler have just been incarcerated? Like, if we took that guy into custody, guys literally, like, started this massive war, murdered 20 million Russians, not to mention the Holocaust, right? Like, so just jail, right? Like, just jail for this guy? You know? I'm a bit like, I just think that there is a line. And that maybe we could seriously have a real discussion about what that line actually is. And I mean, it's difficult because the United States is such an illegitimate society. Like, I understand why people take this position. No death penalty. Because the American system of justice and governance is so illegitimate that to imagine it executing people, it's like you could never imagine it would be doing so justly. Right? You could never imagine it. So I understand why people take that line. But I don't know. I tend to think of these things outside of the purview of the American government, I suppose. You two are like bickering like kids. You two. When are you two kids gonna kiss and make up? There's no tightening up capital punishment. I mean, certainly in the American system, without a doubt, right? Of course, it also bars instruction in schools that suggests anyone is privileged or oppressed based on their race or skin color. Yep, fascists be doing fascist shit as usual. Pretty normal. Pretty normal, right? And let me be really clear, because I don't want to be seen as flippant. I know that, like, people have gotten really after me on this particular issue, right? Is that I just, the thing that I struggle with, right? The thing that I struggle with on this particular issue is that I do think that there is a line. Like, it seems to me that the people who are just like, no death penalty, just don't seem to think that there is ever at any point a line. And I think that there is. Like, I think that there is. I think that there is a line that a person can cross that they cannot come back from. And I mean, we could point at, like, somebody like George W. Bush. I'm just like, yeah, I think that guy crosses a line that he can't come back from. That if we were to arrest him and send him to The Hague and he was sentenced to be hung, I would eat popcorn and watch it happen. And I would hope that stands as a testament for future generations to be like, oh yeah, you can't launch a war against a nation without a good justification and murder a million people and steal their oil, while the entire rest of the world, including NATO, is saying, we're not doing this with you. And you say, we're going to do it with or without you. You're either with us or you're with the terrorists, right? Like, I think George W. Bush should be hung. Like, and I think that that's a fine and normal thing for a person to think. And but at the same time, I understand, like, it's not happening, right? That's not how capital punishment actually works, right? That's not what's actually going down in the society. That it's like, mentally ill kids in Texas that get executed for stealing chocolate bars and stuff, right? Like, so I understand why people are like, no death penalty, because we suck at it. Like, we suck at it. We're just, like, not an intelligent people. And so if we're not an intelligent people, then we shouldn't be trusted with something like capital punishment. So I think, like, in the real, to kind of close my thoughts on this, right? In the real, I tend to agree with you, Larry. I tend to agree that, like, yeah, we are not capable or competent enough to actually wield something like state capital punishment in a way that could ever be considered just or right or any of that kind of stuff. I tend to agree with you that I wouldn't give the authority, certainly not of this system, certainly not of this government, to start executing people. I wouldn't be in favor of that. But if they were to suddenly say, like, hey, this George W. Bush guy, maybe we should send him to The Hague, I'd be like, interesting. We're going to take a war criminal and put him on trial for war crimes and then hang him? Interesting. So I see where you're coming from, bud. I hope you see where I'm coming from, though. Like, I do think that there are lines. Like, I think that there is, like, a moment where a populist should definitely go, haha, nah, brah. Like, I think that there genuinely are psychopaths in the society. I think that there are people. The problem is that they're usually the owners of the society. Because the system's designed to reward psychopathy. The system's designed to reward psychopathy. If you're super rich, you're a psychopath. It's really obvious to us that if you're rich, you're probably a psycho. Cha-ba-cha-ba-cha-cha. You're welcome. Yay, pro-Western imperialism, NATO jerkfest, hooray. Oh, you're talking about our place? Yeah, it does seem to be like more or less, it is like a pro-NATO sort of a thing, that our communism has tried to get the communist flag on here, but it gets eliminated. The Canadians cannot get their shit together. Boobies. Congratulations. You did it. Just like last time. The Canadian flag is just like a total disaster, right? And the Canadian flag is always small. It's smaller than the last time. The American flag... Oh, did the American flag get destroyed? It was right here. The American flag got destroyed, you guys. Where's the American flag? Well, glory be and mercy me. That's actually like... I said this last time. That one of the things that I've been paying attention to this kind of thing, and the reason why I like this kind of thing and paying attention to this kind of thing, is because it is like a organic art piece, and there's so little of that in the society. There's so little organic art that actually exists. That this existing is actually really, really interesting. An organic kind of graffiti board that everybody is simultaneously participating in, that one person can't come along and just put something on. It's got to be a collective of people, a collection of people, because you can only place one pixel every 5 minutes, and I'll show you what that looks like. Literally click, click, click. There you go. Every 5 minutes I'm allowed to do that. And so if any of these pictures or boards exist, it's because there's a whole group of people who are building it and sustaining it. And you can see like there's like little wars that happen, right? This was a little war. You can see it's actually happening right here, right? And whole chunks of it will come along and just be wiped away, and they'll just like come through and just like clean it out. Or a group will come and try to do that, and then they'll get pushed out. And so it is like this organic art piece that's constantly being created. And the first time it happened, the American flag was like dead center. It was this huge, like, America, fuck yeah. It was like big and bold and crazy. The next time the flag was smaller, and I commented on it, and now the flag is gone. Because it was here. It was here. And now it looks like it's Brazil, right? And is this a South American? What flag is this? Does anybody know what flag this is? The fact that the American flag is gone is actually like wild to me. Like, it's actually wild to me, because usually the people who are are putting the American flag there are like the real, like, America's the greatest country in the world. I'm gonna put on my cowboy hat and hold on to my eagle gun. Yeehaw. The favorite porn of the South is trans porn. You bet it is. Radio Halifax, absolutely good to see. I don't have an issue with trans people, but my views on transgenderism as a whole are unpopular. You might want to think about that, dude. Like, you might want to think about why your views on transgenderism are unpopular. Because you're probably just wrong, right? Like, you're probably just wrong. It's probably unlikely that some uneducated kid knows more about the subject of transgenderism than the people who are experiencing the trans experience, right? It's probably the trans people themselves who know more about the subject. It's probably the people who have actually studied it. It's probably the people who are actually talking about it. And it's probably the people who are actually dealing with those people who know a little bit more about the subject. Like, anytime I encounter any conservative that has opinions about trans people, it's like, what do you know about it? And the answer is fuck all. Fuck all. That they start talking and it becomes obvious really, really fast that they're just clueless, right? And my suspicion is that if you're saying that you have views on transgenderism that are unpopular, it's because you're clueless. So I highly advise you, at this stage in the game, to move forward with a questioning attitude instead of believing that you know what's going on, because I'm going to go out on a limb and say that you probably fucking don't. Oh, he deleted this. What did he say? There's a literal NATO logo surrounded by Lithuanian, Estonian, and Austrian at the bottom. Am I missing it? I'm missing it. I feel like I'm just missing it. Am I dumb? I'm dumb. I feel like I'm dumb. Where's the NATO flag? God damn it, I'm so dumb. Yeah, of course it's surrounded by the flags that I don't know. Lithuanian, Estonian, Austrian? Come on. I bet you they're all just lines. They're just like blue and white lines. Like, what is it with Europe that they all just decided to take like blue, white, and red and then put them in different orders, and somehow that made them all different. And we're all just supposed to go along with that. Meanwhile, Canada, good old maple leaf, thank you very much. Canada. We all know what that is. Right? Distinctive. Little cutesy, though, if you ask me. Little cutesy. All right. I just feel like I'm dumb. Like, I just can't see it. We know the CIA has a large presence on Reddit. Yep, and a lot of Reddit are bloodthirsty radlibs that want to shed orc blood. There was a huge NATO flag on last year's Our Place. You know, I feel like last year I wasn't so, like, hard on NATO. You know what I mean? Like, I wasn't so, like, aware, maybe would be the word to use. Like, I just didn't care that much about NATO. But now, given current events, I'm like, NATO, hey, guys, have you noticed this place NATO? This MK Sublime dude is a femboy? That's great. I love femboys, man. I gotta tell you, dude, here's my ridiculous admission of the day, you guys. Here's my ridiculous admission of the day. My life would be so much better if I was gay. Like, you have no idea, you guys. Like, I have this giant beard. I'm kind of a big burly guy. I dress fantastically. You have no idea how often I get like little femboys and twinks coming up to me and hitting on me. It happens often. And so often that I'm like, dude, if I were gay, this would be so much better for me. Like, it would be. My life would be easier in so many ways. But shamefully, I shouldn't say shamefully, it's just how it is. Unfortunately, there you go. I interact with many trans people regularly. I respect them, treat them like people. Because they are people, yeah. It comes down to my personally understood logic. I respect pronouns and names and whatnot. Good start. I don't have an issue with the homosexuals, just the homosexual agenda. Yeah. Mikhail, good to see you, bud. I was watching the debate on CTV, and they were talking about that country song, Try That in a Small Town, and the host suggested that the opposite to that kind of message, like WAP and songs about gang violence. I think he was being racist. I think those small towns in the song are sundown songs. I don't actually think I know the song, so. Ooh, here we go. MK Sublime. I do believe transgenderism comes from a mental defect, but it doesn't really matter to me, and it doesn't matter how I feel about it. It's their business, and I respect them. So why do you got to believe it's a mental defect? Like, that's kind of like a purity position, don't you think? That, like, man and woman are not defective. Anything other than that is defective. Right? It's kind of an odd way of thinking about it. Right? Couldn't I then make the statement that gay people have a mental defect? Right? Isn't your thinking just rooted in the idea that straight man and straight woman are correct, and that's mental and normal? Like, there's a normalness to that. Isn't that you just putting your own confines on the universe and saying that this is normal, this is not. So says I. Well, who cares what you think? Like, why do you got to frame it like a mental defect? What's with this mental defect language that you're using? Like they're lesser than, like they're subhuman, like they're outside of the actual frame of reality. Like that there's a box in which normal things exist, and then outside of that are trans people. Why does that box exist? Why have you erected such a box in the first place? Jib Jabby, love your name. Got any suggestions for organizing in Vancouver? Here is my suggestion for organizing every single time, okay? You can find your local group, and I suggest you do. Find your local socialist group. Try to find a socialist group. Try to find like something like Socialist Action, right? I actually suggest contacting Socialist Action. See if there's a Vancouver branch of Socialist Action, right? I bet there is. But more importantly than that, and far more terrifying, Jib Jabby, go talk to your neighbors. And I don't mean the people down the street, and I don't mean the people you find at your community center or at your school. I mean the people who live in the apartment next door. Go knock on their door and say, "Hey, have you noticed how ridiculous everything is? What do you think about what do you think about this capitalism thing? Huh? What do you think about all of this? Hey, maybe we should be organizing structures outside of the system of capital. Maybe we should grow a garden. Hey, what there's like a patch of land between the two of our houses. Why don't we just tear that up and grow a garden together? What do you think?" That's real politics. That's real organizing. And it's much more difficult, especially for us as a people. We're so disenfranchised from one another and so isolated from one another, right? We're so terrified of our neighbors, right? That that we don't want to knock on our neighbor's door, and we don't want to like give them a little card that says, "Hey, sick of capitalism? Maybe let's talk about it," right? And it's especially terrifying if you're living in like an apartment building, because if the landlords get a whiff of that, you know shit's going to come your way, right? You know shit's going to come your way, and so, but that's the risk that you take, and that's what real organizing is. Right? That like, yes, get involved in your local group. Yes, find a solidarity group. Yes, try to find some kind of like political force out there. Go to protests, do all that kind of stuff. But the real politics, the real organizing is knock on your neighbor's door. And try to create systems of mutual aid with the people who live around you. Literally next door to you. That's the best advice that I think that you can get. And it's advice for myself as well. I'm very bad at this. I'm very, very bad at this. And everybody's exhausted and everybody's terrified and nobody knows what's going on. And the idea of like actually talking to one another and then mobilizing together, it's terrifying. It's terrifying. It's way easier to believe that you're going to like go off and find some already established organization. You're already going to find something that's already, the wheels are already turning, and you'll join that and it'll whisk you away and you'll just have to show up and you'll be handed the thing and all of that kind of stuff. That's what you want to think is going to happen, and it's not going to go that way. It's just not. It's just not going to go that way, right? The way it's actually going to work is that you're going to talk to your neighbors, and you're either going to talk to your neighbors now, right? Or you're going to talk to your neighbors as the destruction is happening around you. And that's the way it's going to go, right? Like, that's the way it's going to go. You are going to be forced into a position of mutual aid no matter what. And so my position is that you might as well get to know these people's names beforehand. Like, do you know your neighbor's name? I know the name of my neighbor across here, and there's a new couple that just moved in over here that I just met today. And then there's a lady that I talked to. She sits down here. I'm getting to know these people who live around me, right? That's my advice. And it's tough because I know we're all introverts. We're all shut-ins. Come on, let's be straight. We're all introverted shut-ins. It's why you're here, right? Looking at your computer, listening to a guy on the computer. Because it's easier. This is easier to do, right? But the truth is that you got to know your neighbors. You got to. Like, if you actually want to get involved in politics, if you actually want to organize, if you actually want to do anything, this is universal advice. Because the reality is that Vancouver, like the word Vancouver, like that idea, that doesn't exist. That's like a political edifice of something that we've created in order to sort of locate you on a map or something, right? But it's all just people in places. That's all it is. And so be a person in a place and find the other people who are in the same place as you, and grow a garden, right? Do things that the capitalists don't want you to do. Provide food for one another, provide shelter for one another, provide relief for one another, find ways to build systems outside of the system of capital. And the only way you're actually going to do that is if you go, hi, my name's Jim Jabby. Jim Jabby. So that's my advice, my man. And it's advice for me as well. That's the reason why I get so uppity about it, because it's like I gotta do more of that. I gotta get more upfront about that kind of stuff. As a person, this is from Eric, as a person who is against the death penalty, I am actually an advocate to rehabilitate anyone, including Adolf Hitler, because all souls have the potential to be redeemed. That's actually a beautiful sentiment, my man. It is actually kind of a beautiful sentiment. I don't agree. Like, I don't agree. I think that there are people who are just that cannot be rehabilitated. I just think that that's true. That, like, there are people who exist who are just like, I killed that person and I will kill again. And I don't feel guilty about killing that person. And if you were like, do you want to, like, be rehabilitated? Do you want to be part of the society? They'd be like, no, if I get released from this cage, I'm going to kill again. That's what I'm here to do, and I'm going to do that. And I'm just kind of like, does that person need to be around? Does that person need to stick around? Killing bad people once they're caught is pointless, as it's been proven that it's not a deterrent. Also, if you take care of them real good, they may cure COVID or the climate crisis. Set other prisoners on the right path. TikTok would have banned John 4 times already this stream. Lamau. Don't go after George Bush or Nazis. Yeah, you're right, John. It's actually so much more freeing to not have TikTok. I feel like I could just shoot my mouth off and say whatever I want. And some of it I'm only like half serious about, right? Not the George W. Bush stuff. Like, I'm dead serious about that. That if we actually did get that guy and send him to the Hague, I'd be like, great. Like, I'm dead serious about that. Yeah, and Larry's right to bring this up. Who decides when someone gets the death penalty, right? A council? Who appoints that council? A vote in Parliament? So now it's political dissenters. Yet there's no way to implement a just system of capital punishment. Yeah, that is a fair argument to take, Larry. Like, it's why I don't get really uppity against people, or I try not to get uppity on this particular issue, because I do think that that's a fair point, right? Like, it's perfect. We don't need to imagine the death penalty being misused. We know that the death penalty has been misused. Like, we know the death penalty has been misused, which is why I ostensibly practically agree with you, right? In the practical sense, that when I'm talking about this, I'm talking about this in a more, I guess, philosophical sort of, or well, not philosophical, but like there's an abstraction for me, whereas I don't think I rubber to the road, like put it down, like I tend to agree with your position, but there's always just that little part of me, and I just don't think that's ever going to go away from me, right? And maybe this is like just like it's a me problem. It's just something that I have to accept, that there's always going to be a little part of me that's just like, yeah, that person should probably die, right? And I just don't feel wrong about saying that there are people in the society, and I'm not talking about like Jim Bob, Billy Bob, right? I'm talking about the President of the United States of America. Like, I'm talking about people who have real power. Like, and I'm just like, yeah, if that person was sent to a prison and was sentenced to death, I would be fine with that. You know, and I just don't think it's ever going to stop. I just don't think I'm ever going to get away from it. Because, like, I don't know, fuck Bush, I guess. In terms of the U.S., I'm against the death penalty as long as the current status quo, the way of things continue. If this system and ruling class and justice system are smashed and replaced, yeah, then sure. But I think Larry would go farther than this. I think that he's saying that no, I think that even under like a proletariat governing system, like I don't want to put words in your mouth, Larry, but I bet you're opposed to the executions that happened in China even, right? That the Chinese government executed some of those billionaires. And I suspect that you're against that as well, right? And probably along those same principle, right? That what I actually really like about the anti-death penalty position is that it's consistent. There's a consistency to it that is just straight up like no death penalty, and that I think there's something just about saying, like someone like me is saying, okay, no death penalty, but what about, right? Is what I'm essentially saying. You're going no death penalty. And I'm going, okay, but what about burger? And then you're just saying, I don't care, no death penalty. I don't care how difficult it is for you. I don't care how hard a pill that is to swallow for you or even me, no death penalty. And I'm just like, I admire that kind of consistency. And I can see, I have a similar view. I have views that are like this. Where, so for me, I think interventionalism, right? What in Star Trek would be called the Prime Directive, right? Like we don't intervene in the affairs of other nations. I'm like this too, on this particular issue. That I don't care if that nation falls into a civil war. I don't care if the military coups its government. I don't care if there is some kind of crazy event going on within that nation. We do not intervene. And it's a tough pill to swallow. And because people will always do the same thing. They're always, well, what about that? Well, what about this? Or what about... Because the trouble is that intervention always makes it worse. Always makes it worse. No matter how good your principles are. No matter how good your idea is. No matter how just you think your action is. Intervening will always make the situation worse. No matter how bad the situation actually is. And so a policy of non-interventionalism, which is something that I actually believe in, leads to a similar sort of place where I just say non-intervention. But what about non-intervention? But what about, well, non-intervention? And it seems like when it comes to the death penalty, that's a similar sort of a thing that's happening. But it's happening now to me, where you're saying no death penalty. I'm going, but what about, and then you're going, no death penalty. And I'm going, but what about, and then no death penalty. And so I've got to respect that for what it is. And maybe that's something that I should actually take seriously, simply based on the consistency. simply based on the philosophical and righteous consistency of it. That my kind of gut desire for justice and my gut feeling for vengeance, I'll be honest, vengeance plays, doesn't supersede basic organizational principles of society. And something as simple as no death penalty, regardless of the situation, is has a consistency, it has a predictability. Yeah. I see where you're coming from, bud. Yeah, I'm really glad that we had this conversation, my man. That's an interesting conversation, because I think that is sort of the truth. Is that intellectually, I think you actually do have the high ground. That I am not coming from a place of intellectual consistency with that issue. I think that that's true. That I am definitely coming from it from an emotional position. That I would like to see these guys die. Like I'm not going to sugarcoat it. If George W. Bush got hit by a car today, I would celebrate it. If Henry Kissinger, when Henry Kissinger dies, I'm going to celebrate it. Like I'm not going to bullshit you guys. I think that these people deserve death, and I'm going to look forward to the moment that they die. Right? But that's an emotional, that's something that exists inside of me emotionally. We probably shouldn't base public policy on that. Right? That we should base public policy on sober intellectual thought. And I struggle with this because I use the examples of the billionaires that got executed in China, that I'm sitting here and I'm going like, yeah, fuck those guys, man. Like there's like a righteousness to it, you know, that like these guys, they fucked around and they found out, right? Like they fucked around and they found out, right? And so there's something righteous about it. And but I can't sit here and pretend like my position is one that's rooted in intellectual rigor. That it is very much just like there's like a catharsis, like a release in my heart and in my gut that's just like, fuck yeah. And that's me being as honest as I possibly can. That it's probably correct that we don't base public policy on somebody going, yeah, get those fuckers. Probably not the best place to design public policy from. There you go. There's some unexpected commentary, right? This is, you know what I really love about doing this channel, and it always strikes me from time to time, it's like you would never, ever in a million years hear that kind of thing from any other person ever. I just literally just said my position was wrong, right? Who else is ever going to do that? Ever. Nobody. That's why you all tune in. That's why you all love me. Adam, I don't think we understand the human brain enough to kill someone over their actions. Sure, keep them away from society if they're such a danger, but I think free will is like a butterfly. Dude, a butterfly in a hurricane. Sure, you have an idea that something is going on around you, and you may attempt to go to a certain path, but it's not really under your control. Oh, yeah. I don't know if I have like my dad's voice ringing in the back of my head, which is like, you know, it costs like $400,000 to house a prisoner over the course of his entire life. Bullet costs 10 cents. You know? There's some dark conservatism for you right there. Is made capitalism's death penalty for being disabled or poor? Yeah, no kidding. Yeah. This is just the truth of it. Nothing about the current government is just or trustworthy. So therefore, I don't trust them with the ability to dish out the death penalty. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Like, I wouldn't trust this government to do that, for sure. The Vietnamese and Palestinian flags are gone. Yeah, they were there for a minute. And now, well, oh goodness. Where were? Yeah, they were here with the American flags, so they got wiped out with. It's you know what it is. You know what's happening, is that the like Brazilians are waking up. They're just finding out that this exists. This happened last time too, where like Europe would go to sleep, and so another section of the world would wake up, and then they would mark it all over with their section of the world, and then the next section would wake up, and there would be like there is like this cyclical cycle effect. Eric says, just to demonstrate how far I would go on redemption, I believe that God would forgive the devil himself. And in turn, I would forgive the devil as well, even though he is the author of sin. That's goddamn poetic, Eric. Larry says, you could argue that Nuremberg trials were a kangaroo court. Goring, while a vile war criminal, was right about challenging the jurisdiction of the court. Well, and also, I do actually think there is some credibility in saying that the Nuremberg trials existed in order to placate the public. That they ended up executing 12 Nazis in the end of it all, and that's supposed to be like this big like cathartic moment for the entirety of World War II. Everyone's supposed to go like, yeah, justice. We got justice. 12 Nazis. Meanwhile, the CIA is doing like Operation Paperclip, right? They're taking Nazis and putting them into NASA, right? Like they're putting them in the nuclear program, like that. The Nazis are being rehabilitated through the process of NATO, right? Like it seems to me like the whole thing, the Nuremberg trial, was not just a kangaroo court, but something of a propaganda moment itself. That it wasn't done to get justice against those Nazis. It was really done to like show the public something so that they'd shut up about the Nazis that we're using. Like that seems to be more or less the takeaway that I've got from the Nuremberg trials. Right? It's not like the West suddenly became anti-Nazi in a serious way. Like sure, we'll let Indiana Jones shoot a bunch of them, but we're still going to like have them in NASA. Portugal, thank you. Got an image of that group art thing from the first day. I don't have it on hand, but... isn't the word twink kind of derogatory? Is it? If so, I apologize. If anybody out there is offended. I actually don't know. Like it's just so maybe I don't know. It's just I've always understood it. It's I don't know, a small, slight, thin, gay man, right? Like that's how I understand it. Like I'm a bear, right? Like, if I were gay, I would be a bear. Right? And a bear has, a twink. Right? 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 It's next to the V at the bottom. There. Is that it? Sort of. Dude, it is so obvious that the NATO emblem is based on the Nazi swastika. Like, it's so clearly the case that they were basically just like, yeah, just do the Nazi swastika, but straighten it out a little bit. Let's put a little black right there. Wow, that went away right away. Oh, wait. Check mark. There we go. Little black right there. There you go. Doing my part. I'm doing my part. You guys could jump on our place. We could all just mar the shit out of this. Right? There's how many of us are in here right now? There's 19 of you right now. We could all do this. You just need to go to Reddit and click on this thing. And then you can go here and you can just start marking the shit out of it. I highly recommend that everybody do this right now. Right? I highly recommend it. Just for the lulz. For the lulz. Imagine being straight. I wouldn't wish that condition on Satan. Bro, you are dead right. Like you are. You're dead right. Being straight is the worst. As a bi person, I think, yes, being straight as normal. I know homosexuality can occur in nature, but it objectively isn't natural. But if homosexual occurs in nature, then it is natural. Like, it is. It just is. Just because you don't think it's natural doesn't mean anything. Like, if it's occurring in nature, it is natural. Like, too bad. The primary goal of every creature is to reproduce. Is it? Is that the primary goal of every creature, is to reproduce? Certainly that's the evolutionary objective, right? That the only, literally from the position of evolution, literally the only, the only attribute that matters to evolution is reproduction. Everything else is secondary. Because if something doesn't reproduce, then it doesn't get passed down the timeline. But is that the primary goal of every creature? So I don't have a kid. Am I not achieving my primary goal? I'm not interested in having a kid. Am I somehow offensive to the primary goal? What is the primary goal? What's MK Sublime? What's the meaning of life? What's the purpose of existence? Do you actually think that the purpose of life and the meaning of life is just reproduction? That we just reproduce for the sake of reproducing? And that's the value? That's the thing that we find our meaning? That's the basis of our existence? Boy, I hope not. Because if that's the case, man, I've missed out. The only genetic freak that's not normal is Big Papa Pump. Big Bad Booty Data. I have no idea what you're talking about, Cotton, but I'm in for it. Twink isn't derogatory. It's actually a descriptor that's used in the gay community. So, but these things can change very fast. Right? These things can change very fast. So, damn, I wish I could share my chili I made with y'all. Oh, man. You guys are going to make me hungry. You guys are going to make me hungry. Adam and Steve were real. I don't know. I'm an asshole. I'm not particularly bothered if a capitalist gets a fair trial or not. Mikhail, I think the argument of there are worse punishments than death is worth considering during debates about the death penalty. Is it worse to keep people alive just to torture them as a deterrent? I've thought about that as well, you know, Mikhail, that like, if somebody said to me, we're going to take you and lock you in a box for the rest of your life, or we're going to shoot you, pick one, I might be inclined to get shot, you know? That if I had to choose it for myself, like, I don't want to be locked in a box. That sounds bad. I don't care about fair play. I don't think it bothers me at all if any onlookers felt the Nazis weren't getting fair play at The Hague. Yeah, I mean, but I think that I'm right when I'm saying that that's coming from a place. I think that's coming from an emotional place. Tinker says, wait a minute, what about Daryl Davis converting 200 plus KKK members? Shouldn't we talk to some of these bastards? I mean, if you can. Mr. Moon, what are we looking at? This is, remember the canvas from Our Place? This is Reddit doing Place again, and I really love it. Look at this. Look at this, the Chaos guys. They're getting the whole, like, another arm in. They're, like, carving across the way. I love these guys. This is my favorite part of this whole board, is the Void. This group, their whole ethos and their whole idea is to just consume everything and to consume the board itself. That nothing, that it is all temporary. That everything can be wiped away, should be wiped away, and it just gives you this kind of haunting sense of a dark underbelly, as if it's like breaking out through the picture, consuming everything it sees. It gives like a great dark existentialism to this project that I really, really love. And the last Our Place, the void was really haunting. It was a really haunting, beautiful. I wonder if I can find that video, because I loved that whole experience. It was so cool to see. Place the void video. It was my favorite part about it. Yeah, this is it right here. This is it right here. Turn that off, and then it's gonna skip the ad. Boink. Like this is it showing up at first. This is like a time lapse of the whole thing. What's so hilarious is like halfway through, somebody puts like a fucking ad on it. Capitalism ruins everything. Like, look at how crazy this thing is, man. Like, everybody else is doing like ads and stuff, and everybody else is doing like, and it just like adapts and evolves over time. You can see even the void even eats itself at one point, with the exception of the crazy multi-eyed head, and then it gets blended into the head that's above it, steadily spreading and consuming, reaching out its tendrils, expanding. God, I think this is so cool. And the ending, you can see the head above it. Tortilla Land 2. You see the head above it even creates the multi-eyed imaged picture. And then at one point it gets destroyed, and then a hand appears from nowhere. The word "don't." And then that leads to the entire destruction of the board. It's such a haunting and beautiful art piece. And easily and hands down the best thing that happened in that whole moment. I'm gonna play it again because I just think it's so cool that this first picture is put up not by the Void people; it gets adopted by the Void people, and that they start to create this image together, which now you're seeing reflected here. This image, and what's so interesting to me is that this is just starting. That they tried actually earlier to make a void down here. But as you can see, it got overwhelmed. It got overwhelmed by this flag, and it got overwhelmed by other stuff. And then they had a little fight over here, and then they had another little fight down here, and now they've taken root right here. And it's just beginning. And if you see the first time it went around, when it was just beginning, right? That it was just like a black and sort of like a goofy smiling idiot, right? And that over time it built into something creepier and cooler and more wild and demonic. I mean, crazy. I love the transition here, right over here with the face that has two eyes, and then they break it all apart and then give it multi eyes. When it starts to get multiple eyes and become even more inhuman and less and more obviously some kind of like demonic creature, when that's going to begin real soon. And just like and this happened over the course of several days. So this is just getting broken into. Here it comes, the break apart, and then the eyes start to form from it. And the fact that it's all happening organically, and it's like thousands of people doing this. Tortilla Land 2. Capitalism ruining everything. And then these final moments right here where somebody or some force comes along and tries to wipe it out, right? They black out the whole thing, but then it reestablishes itself almost immediately. That the void people are like, no, this is the void. This is here. And it comes in, and then the hand. Who is responsible for the hand? Just this haunting image pressing up against the void, followed up by the word don't. It's just like a scream against the nihilistic nature of our existence. That the void in this art piece exists as an ever-present reminder that for all of your creative efforts, all will be consumed by the void. And yet, the people themselves cry out against this, demanding it be that it itself, the reminder of this present consumption, is obliterated. And that a human hand presses up against it and says, don't, before the entire board succumbs to the very nature of the void itself and is destroyed. It's brilliant. It's the most brilliant art piece I think the West has ever produced. And it happened organically on Reddit, randomly, not planned whatsoever. And even the capitalists couldn't ruin it with their goddamn Tortilla Land 2. Like, literally, like, we're making something really awe-inspiring and beautiful and glorious, and they're like, Tortilla Land 2! Everybody come check out Tortilla Land 2! So that's what I'm looking at this for. Because this is round 2. That they tried to do something down here and it didn't work out. Because mainly it's because of this flag, actually. The trans place flag came and wiped it right out. But now here they are, and I think here they stand, and we'll see if they survive. There was at one moment here on the French flag a guillotine that said "fuck spez" on the guillotine, and the Reddit administrators themselves actually wiped it out several times. Then anytime they tried to reestablish the guillotine, they just wiped it out. It was very, very clear that there was somebody, like a Reddit admin, standing there with like a blotter, just being like, nope. Oh, check this out. This is what I love. This is my favorite thing. This is my absolute favorite thing to see on this board. Look at this. Just like they're just deciding, nope, this is going away now. This is going away, and you can see the struggle. You see that like a group of people are saying like, no, okay, we're going to systematically, like they're on a Discord right now. They're doing what we're doing now, except they're like actively working together, right? But you can see that the Turkish flag people, the Turks, are just like, nope, we're here to defend this, you bitch. You're definitely not. We're definitely not just going to let you do this, right? So there's like that the nature of the board itself demands vigilance. It insists that what survives on this board is at its very nature the people who are the most dedicated. It's the people who want this to be here. That if you want this to stay here, then you need to commit to it being here. And if you don't defend it, if you decide to put it there and then walk away, someone else will come along and wipe it away and put something else there. And you see it right now. There's a group of people who clearly are like, let's get rid of this Turkish flag, and the Turkish flag people are just like, absolutely not. You go away. And then through this process, there can be concessions. Like I remember the last time something similar happened to this, and then flags shrink. Right, spaces shrink, and you can see that happens. Like the Germans came in and basically thump right across the board, eh? Well, over time, there will be a concession that, like, eventually people will start to cut in. Like here's a concession that's going to start happening, right? You don't see much. Oh, there is a bit of a fight over it. Oh, I know, Milo. I know. Anyway, I'm going on about this because I think it's so fucking cool. I think this whole board, I think the whole idea of this board is super, super cool. They can't keep it up for very long because it inevitably devolves into racism and nudity. That's the truth. Is that in the first thing that seems to happen, and it's predictable, and this is an interesting part about it too, that I think is really, really fascinating about these boards. The first thing that happens is flags, right? That's fascinating. And a real indication that human nationalism, that nationalism is just deeply ingrained in the heart of humanity, and that it's just something that we want. We want people to know we are here. Here is our flag. There's a bunch of us from Britain, from France, from Germany. Here we are. And you can't say otherwise because we're supporting and defending our flag. Here we are. And then you do get statements like this fuck spez moment. I think is very specific to what's going on right now because of what the decision that Reddit made in regards to its third-party apps. I think this is a response to that. And the fact that it's standing, the fact that nobody's touching it is itself a pretty interesting statement, right? Like, usually something that took up this much space, people would obliterate. That this would be gone and this would be gone and there would be a concession. But everybody's just like, no, we're leaving it. And that by itself is very interesting. And then the void shows up, right? And then and the void is that sort of negative creative response, which I think is really, really, really fascinating. But inevitably, what always happens on these boards, and the reason why they get shut down inevitably, is racist slogans and racist logos begin to pop up and need to be censored. And the Reddit admins do that for a period of time. And then nudity, straight up, just like tits and ass, right? And dicks, right? It happens every time. And then eventually it just gets so out of hand that they just shut the board down, right? And I'm more or less of the opinion, like, I kind of wish that we'd just let it go, because then we'd get a real good look at ourselves. We get a real, real good look at ourselves. You used twink fine the first time when you said bears. I didn't say that bears have twinks, but it does seem like, I know for myself, like, I, as a bear, would go for a twink. Like, that's... I feel like I'm digging a hole here, and I'm just gonna admit it. I'm just gonna admit it and just be like, I apologize to anyone and everyone. I don't mean to offend anyone. John, did you like the Friedkin movie Cruising? I don't think I'm familiar with that movie. I remember last time there was this disgusting white savior shit saying save Chinese. Oh yeah, I remember that. Save Chinese women from CCP. I do remember that. That didn't stay up for very long, but it definitely existed. You said there are alternative punishments to the death penalty, but why do we need to punish people? Sure, protect society if they're a threat to others' well-being, but beyond that, perhaps if someone is being naughty, we can assign them to be someone's butler for a spell. There are many different ways. Like, one of my favorites comes out of the Jewish tradition, which is that you relocate people, right? You don't imprison them. That the theory is that it's not the fault of the individual. It's that there is an environmental issue, that the environment is connecting to the individual and creating this outcome. And so the theory is to relocate the individual in a new environment, and then that will and then hopefully that new environment fosters a better outcome for that individual. And I don't know, I'm kind of fond of that idea, right? And I mean, that's an interesting idea when you're living in a system that doesn't have prisons, right? Dude, this is just getting cooler. They're like sharpening this stuff up, making it more crazy. Like the webs are getting really awesome. I love it. I love it. I know, Milo. You're such a good boy. I know it's hot, eh, buddy? It's really hot. It is super, super hot in here, dude. Oh. You mean Matt Damon? Oh. You know, guys, I am actually like blisteringly hot and really exhausted. So I think I'm going to call it for today. Little early, but such is life. Always remember, okay, guys? Each and every one of you is a quantum being walking around in quantum energy. These billionaires are spending hundreds of billions of dollars in the hopes you'll never realize it. You'll just stay the good little commodity they need you to be. Rebel. Revolt. Repent. Good luck. We're going to need it.